here I want to talk about the question that you just brought up, which is like, do we want stories that don't hinge on this? And I think one thing I will say is like this, it is not the only trope that exists.
Yes.
There are other romantic tropes. There are other sources of romantic conflict, right? Like we named some like big hitting straight like hetero romance things that hinge on forbidden
Forbidden
love
love.
as
Yeah.
the main like conflict driver of the story, but it is not the only one in existence. There are other stories, and we are starting to see other stories, right?
Like the best friends to lovers,
Best friends
the
to lovers, enemies
um
to lovers, like
yeah, I mean,
uh
would you consider enemies to lovers to be a forbidden love story?
no, I don't think so. I think it's just like the conflict of like
Not
what
liking
creates
someone and then
passionate,
being like, yeah.
like where does passion come from in a relationship? And like honestly, we could talk about like the problematic things that I think come out of that trope as well, because there
Or
are a
like,
lot of
okay,
them.
like the notebooks of the world, is that a forbidden love story? Yes. Because they're two different social classes?
Yeah, it
Or would you
yes,
consider them
yes.
more to be just like a separate trope all in of it all
It's a little
in
bit
of
of
itself?
I feel like there's two tropes at play in there, right? Because I do think that like class like disconnect love stories are a
Like the
type of
Titanic is
yes,
also
like the
forbidden love.
Titanic is a forbidden love story for sure.
I
Um
like give us two freaking lesbians with a steamy window and the hands, please.
yeah.
You you can still keep
Give
Kate
us
Winslet in there. It's fine.
give us Kate Winslet in something other than Ammonite. Okay. Uh who said
Please.
that? What? Ammonite, another forbidden love story,
Yes.
right? But no, here's okay. There are other tropes, okay?
Yes.
It is important to recognize that there are other tropes. And it's not like forbidden love is a bad trope. I don't think it's a bad trope. Here's what I think I find interesting while we are in this period where it feels like we are shifting out of these being the only stories we can tell,
Hmm.
right? Is that this overwhelmingly dominates queer stories and queer representation and queer media, right? Like to a, as we just covered, almost ludicrous percent, right?
Yes. Probably
It's
95%.
it's so prominent. And the thing is like if we as poorly evolved monkeys
Hmm.
are sort of primed to love this, right? And to love that rush and that sense of like breaking the rules and like the tabooness of it and the like that feeling of like doing something that you're not supposed to and like how ooh that's so hot and sexy and fun and like here's my problem when you set up queer people to believe and to only ever see that and to associate romance with like that level of like ooh hot sexy spicy forbiddenness, right?
Hmm.
Is that a problem for queer people's ability to form lasting
Oh
relationships in a
yeah,
healthy way?
well, yes. I mean, because a long-lasting healthy relationship in and of itself cannot be forbidden.
Right,
Like
that's what I'm saying.
like
Like
at some
they're
point, like
they're
you cannot live a secret life with
right.
someone indefinitely. Like the exciting part of the forbidden love is the also a little bit of the like um I don't know the right word, but the brevity of it.
Yes.
The quit like this cannot last forever.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is so exciting in the moment. But there's no way to maintain a forbidden love story for 80 years. Like
Right.
even in the notebook, at some point they had to choose to be together and like either say like, okay, screw off to society, right? But we're gonna be together forever. And still their relationship is actually quite toxic. But you can't, yeah, you cannot
Right.
write a story where these characters stay together forever and live happily ever after, because the tenuous nature of the forbiddenness,
Yeah.
it
Wears
doesn't, it's
off.
not meant to last. Yeah.
It wears
And
off.
it will
And
wear off. If either
so
it wears
here's the
off
thing.
and then you're like, okay, I'm bored.
When
Oh,
you
yeah.
when you say, like, let's talk about forbidden love, what's the first example you gave?
Romeo and Juliet, they're
Right.
dead.
And they die. Right? And so Romeo and Juliet, like, again, I know it gets discussed a lot when people like, oh, let's analyze the text of Romeo and Juliet and all this stuff, right? And one of the things you always talk about is you're like, Romeo and Juliet is always discussed as this, here's the top of romantic
Romance, yeah.
stories, right? And you're like, these are two teenagers who were told that they shouldn't do something, and so they immediately do it, and it ends horribly because this is
Horribly.
a bad idea, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
this is not and probably should not ever have been the be all and end all of what romantic
Yes, love should
stories
be.
look
Yeah.
like in our media. And yet somehow here we are. And I think nobody experiences that truth more than queer people who have
Hmm.
seen almost nothing else forever.